Hello and welcome to the July Plan with me. If you're new here, my name is Kanova and this month's theme is entitled Quella Bella Sensazione, which translates to that beautiful feeling. We'll get into why I titled the theme that, but first let's get started. So I typically do pre-sketching, but before I could do any of that this time, I needed to cut out my Dutch doors. I used a stencil, which you can see in the corner, that little bit of green, to figure out the shape of my stencil. It's just a curved stencil. It's got lots of different shapes on it, and you can use it to create basically a lot of different types of edges. And so I found one I liked and then I set it up, and now I am going through and cutting each page. I didn't trace on each page because I wanted it to be absolutely positively as close to the very same curve on every page, which is really difficult to do when you are just free drawing it with the stencil on every page. This is the most consistent way to do it. I was inspired by the most recent Archer and Olive subscription box. It's the June 22 subscription box. I'm not sure what the actual theme and title for it was, but it had a real European summer vibe. I think Italy and Portugal, the hand-painted tiles. It featured things like bicycles and everything, but I leaned into this idea of lemons. I happen to love lemons, and I often will hand-painted thank you cards to friends that feature lemons. I love lemons, but the lemon theme is very popular, so I had been avoiding it in my bullet journal. But this just gave me the incentive I needed to get started and lean into the theme. I threw in some peaches because I had some beautiful ink. The Distress Oxide ink really gives a lot of like that furry peach texture, and I decided to use it to create my lemons and featured the blossoms from these two particular fruits in the drawings. I also wanted to lean heavily into this idea of hand-painted tiles and textiles. If you've been here a while, you know that it's something that I love. We'll get into how I did that in just a second, but I used to make the blossoms and the leaves a couple of different mediums. I use the Archer and Olive Acrylographs to create the flower blossoms, and I use my Tombow markers, the dual tips, to create the leaves that you see. To recreate the look of these hand-painted tiles, I wanted to almost look like a wall of tiles. I used a square stamp that I had purchased from Amazon. I purchased a lot of them, but I settled on one pattern and I used it throughout the whole setup. This is where I realized that I didn't want it all the way to the edge, and I started the cleanup process, which took a while. Mistakes are very difficult to clean up. So here we are on my calendar page. That was the first mistake, and then we're gonna see the second mistake here. So I pre-drew this calendar. Mostly I do this just for time. It's easier when recording to not have to count out all the boxes. I do have a stencil from Archer and Olive, which makes this a little bit easier, but it's still time consuming nonetheless. So I wanted to use the stamp all over on this page as well, but this time I decided to use a variety of color. So I am using my washi tape to cover up the edges of the calendar so that it doesn't get on the page. Now I have a lot of these stamps. I just, for whatever reason, was really married to this particular decorative statement. It probably would have looked a little bit more authentic had I used a variety of stamps, but maybe next time. All right, so one of the things that continued to happen while I was stamping it happened on the first page was that because the journal, this is just a note for anyone who's using stamps in the journal, because the journal doesn't lie completely open and flat, the pages look flat but the journal is not. It makes for a very sort of stamp typing process that's kind of bumpy, so it's just good to be cognizant of it. There's not much you can do, but try to provide some support underneath. So I started the process of putting in the dates on my calendar, and then I realized that I started numbering way too soon. So I had the first starting on a Thursday instead of a Friday. So I get to the very end of this calendar and I realize, and I start trying to clean this up by using my Archer and Olive Acrylograph in yellow, but it didn't cover up the marker. So I went out and bought some stickers, and voila. There's usually a creative solution, and sometimes that creative solution works in your favor. This is my dashboard page. I use it to track bills, incoming packages, outgoing packages, that sort of thing. I knew that July was going to be a pretty slow month for those types of items, so I wanted this page to be really decorative. The idea was this greenery wall that was just covered in flowers and leaves. I'm using stamps from a previous subscription box to do this. It's just a layer of 3 different colors. It ends up being 3 different colors even though I'm using 2 because sometimes there's a blend. And then I used my Acrylographs to add some flowers in there, just a little bit of color here and there. I recently put all of my Acrylographs in a 10 that came in the June 2022 subscription box, so I can't tell you where these particular Acrylographs are from, but I used basically an orange and a hot pink and a yellow to create the flowers. Alright, my weeklies. I used a rolling weekly. It's the Alistair method. I talk about it in almost all of my videos. It's the setup that works best for me. It allows me to keep a long list of tasks and then deciding which day to do it on. I just simply use a dot, and if I don't do it, then I can migrate it to the next day. It's really simple and straightforward. On the opposite side, I can simply just list any events that might be happening. While we're going in and adding a little bit of finishing to the Dutch door ledges, I wanted to talk a little bit about the feeling I got when I got the Archer and Olive subscription box. It really just transported me into summer and this idea of travel, and something about it just made me feel really excited, and I wanted to have what I described as this beautiful feeling I got when I opened the box and unboxed everything, and I wanted to translate that into my journal. So I'm hoping that these pages, despite mistakes along the way, evoke a sense of just sort of carefree travel and happiness throughout the month. For my mood tracker, I'm leaning back into this idea of the European ceramics. I created what is supposed to look like a plate wall. At the end of the month, each plate will be basically stamped and colored in based on my mood. I used Acrylographs to create the decorative edges. I used a stencil to create that little motif there. You could probably freehand draw it, but I like to try to keep things as consistent as possible when I'm drawing something over and over again. This is my line a day. It is my workhorse page in terms of just allowing myself to de-stress really quickly in one line. I write all kinds of things here. Sometimes it's just words, sometimes it's a sentence, but it's something that I use every night before I go to bed. I do my mood tracker and then I come here. So this is washi tape. I love using washi tape to finish pages, and I use this washi tape from the June subscription box, and it almost immediately made my weeklies look 100% better. They just came alive. I used a X-Acto knife to trim off the edges, because sometimes you don't need all of the tape, or you want just half of it, and you can cut it down to size. If you have been here a while, you know I struggle with calligraphy, and I decided to use the stencil this month, though it didn't help me much. I will say with stencils, it's probably easier to use markers and maybe go back in with an acrylograph pen if that's something that you want to do. We haven't talked about mistakes in a minute, but here is one. Working with stamps can sometimes be difficult because you think you got it all lined up, but not so much. I used Archer and Olive stamps. Again, this came in a previous subscription box. Actually, most of these Archer and Olive stamps came from the same subscription box, and I use them all the time. I put them on a glass block. It allows me to see through it, which gives me a little bit more control. There was just so much chaos in creating these spreads. I had to go back and actually look for the number 3. I was like, where is it? Because I stamped all of these and the 3 seemed to disappear. I saw it 1 second and then it was gone the next. I cleaned up my desk, as you can see here. I'm erasing any pencil marks that are still out there and cleaning up my pages, and we're ready for the final flip. If you're not new here, you know exactly what I'm going to say, which is this is my favorite part of the video. If you're not and you're new here, I say it every time I make a video. The final flip is my favorite part, when you see all of the work and you can just kind of assess what you like and don't like. I conceptually love the idea of this page, but the stamps, you can't really see it as much on the video, but in person I can see the cleanup, and I just wanted it to be so clean. On the opposite end, this calendar page, I really liked what ended up happening to it. All of a sudden the calendar has a bit more pizzazz. Of all of the pages I created, I think this garden wall is my favorite. If I ever get, you know, in a bind, I might just create a whole garden wall spread. It really has great visual impact, and somehow I find it soothing. I will say though, these weeklies are going to be a joy to come to every day. The washi tape, this is just one of the ways that washi tape can really just bring your spread alive, and this particular washi tape with all of its patterns and prints, they aren't even the same as what I use throughout. It just sort of evokes the idea of it and allows each of those pages to feel sort of like I spent a lot of time even though I didn't. I'm looking forward. Since I'm putting this video out late, I already did my July 1st mood stamp there, so you get an idea of what it's going to look like as we go along. And I didn't talk much about it, but there's a audition tracker. At this time of the year, things sort of slow down, so I don't need as many pages for that. All right. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, put a lovely summer emoji in the comment section. I'll see you next month.